to our second Awaken podcast. We're excited to be with you today. We are your hosts, Jenny and Khaled. I was going to say Jenny and Khaled. That would have been weird, right?
Right.
But anyway, we have a special guest with us today. We want to introduce her. Her name is Missy Carlo. Say hi, Missy.
Hi.
So we've been friends with her for a long time. At least I have. She's been part of our family for a long time. And she just has so much to share with us today. And I'm excited that she's with us because God has given her such talents and such ability and such knowledge and has used her throughout the years. And so we thought, let's bring her on and let God speak through her today. And so today's topic is going to be about the voice of God and how to hear the voice of God and what the voice of God is. And so we're so excited that she's going to share with us today, and we want you to be a part of it. And again, welcome to our family.
Yeah. So again, welcome. And like he was saying, I think 2 weeks ago we were having lunch and you were sharing your testimony with me and Pastora, and I was just like listening the whole time. And I know you have amazing testimonies, and I cannot wait for you to share it with us. But before we start, just introduce yourself in a way that, I don't know, tell us where you're from, what do you do, how do you make a living, like, I don't know, tell us something about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Missy, like you guys said. Where I'm from, originally my family's Cuban, so I'm a Cuban background. Yeah. And I pretty much grew up in Tampa most of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in Miami for almost 10 years, and then now I'm living in Tampa again, here with my family. I'm so excited, I miss family so much. And for a living, I have my own business. I am an accountant. So it's kind of what I've done for years, did the whole Big Four route for those that know a little bit about accounting. And then I also worked for a ministry for many years as well. Got to kind of combine both the gift of accounting with the Lord and God and putting it together.
Which ministry?
So it's called King Jesus Ministry. Mm-hmm. It's in Miami, Miami, Florida, with Apostle Guillermo Maldonado, right? So we love him very much.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, yeah, and I got to learn so much, working
awesome.
with the team, and yeah, it was beautiful.
That's like everybody's dream job, like
Yeah, for sure.
to work at church or in the ministry or doing something that you love and also make a living. Like, it's awesome. Yeah. That's a blessing. Wow, amazing. There's 2 questions that I'm gonna ask you. This is like our signature question. We ask all of our guests that we bring, and the first one is, what does the word awaken mean in the spiritual world for you?
Okay, so I think for me, awaken means to be aware of what God wants you to do and being in motion into that or towards that. So to be awakened means when a person doesn't know their purpose, they kind of just live day to day. But when a person is full of purpose and they're full of destiny and they're aware of it, they're in a state of being awakened. They're in a state of being aware of what that is. So to me, when I hear awaken, I hear somebody that knows what they're called to do and they're in pursuit of that. They're not sleeping on their dreams. They're not sleeping on their purpose. They're not sleeping on what they're called to do. They're not just letting the days go by, but instead they're saying, I have to go, I have to get up, I have to do this because I know that it's my purpose. It's what I'm called to do.
Wow.
So in other words, it's kind of like you're saying awaken is our decision. A lot of people are waiting for God to awaken them, and they're like, okay, God, I'm waiting for a lightning bolt to hit me so I can finally move, when God is saying, I've already awakened you.
Yes.
Go ahead and do it. And so I think that's the mentality that the church has sometimes, where we're waiting for God to move the pieces in our lives, but we haven't even reached out in faith or stepped out in faith yet in our own personal life. We haven't even made personal decisions towards anything. So it's so awesome that you said that, because being awakened is you taking that first step, you getting up, you moving, you saying, I'm going to pursue my purpose, pursue my calling, pursue what God has for me, instead of just saying, okay, God, I'm here. When is this going to happen? Because we kind of have that mentality sometimes, that laid back, I'm just going to wait for God to do it because I know He's powerful, when God has already given us the resources to be awakened. So that's awesome.
I like what she said. She said, when you know your purpose, just go for it.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. I love it. Ooh, awesome. Second question is, how does being awakened look like in your personal life? Right? Because it could be different. I'm a teacher, you're more into the business, finances world. So how does being awakened look like in your personal life? What do you do to stay awake?
Yes. So I would say my personal life, I divided into two. So I have two passions. I have the business world, which is a passion, but I also love God. So to be awakened in the business aspect means, once I sharpen my skill. So you have to know your craft, you have to study, you have to research, you have to just take steps, towards what you want to become. Not so much in your own strength, but being awakened to know, okay, discerning what season am I in now and what am I called to do in this moment, and focusing on that, putting your effort into that. So I would connect also awaken to effort, because many times we're not in control of the results, but we are in control of our effort, and usually our efforts, it's what will give the results.
That's good.
Yeah. And then with God, I would say I stay awakened by being in constant pursuit of who He is. Not just, I'll go to church, that's nice. No, I need to be in pursuit of what is God saying, what is God doing, what is God up to, and bringing that into manifestation, to those around us, through us, in our environment. What can I do for God? It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be through a platform. It doesn't have to be through something great or big. It could just be through what is God putting in my heart in this very moment, and He will lead you to those steps as you go,
Wow.
Yeah.
Good.
That's awesome. It's kind of like saying, like, awaken, in other words, is instead of saying, what can God do for me? It's, what can I do for God? We've talked about that before on this podcast, especially in the first episode, that a lot of times our mindset is we're waiting for God to do something for us. And there's nothing wrong with expectation. And we do want God to do things in our lives. And we are waiting for Him to do things in our lives. And we will see the manifestation of that. But more importantly, it's what can we do for God? Because that's our purpose. Our purpose is, we were created for worship. We were created for purpose. We were created to carry out His will for our lives. And if that's the case, then being awakened really has to do less about what God can do for us and more about what we can do for God. So I think that's awesome. Yeah.
It's awesome when you get to that point, where you recognize that you don't want to live for yourself anymore. It's like your own, like your agenda, your own desires, like it's not even priority anymore. And you don't even have to make an effort to say, okay, no, I have to really make it second because God is first. No, it's just like, why do I even desire this? Why is this on my agenda? I want God first.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, for sure.
Yeah. And something that I will add on to that is that when we see God for who He is, He will lead you to people, to places and things that we never even thought in our own minds that we were meant to do that. Like God's dreams for us are so much bigger than any of us could have ever even hoped for,
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think all of us sitting here can honestly say that we didn't think we would be here or have the connections that we have or have been the places that we have been or serving in the places that we have served. And it's all been because that was God's purpose and because there was a pursuit. Not saying that we're perfect because we've all missed the mark, but there was a pursuit that happened where we were seeking God's will, God's purpose, and He placed us in situations that, thank the Lord, we've been used in, and God has done things in our lives, and God has touched people through us. So I just desire that for everybody watching this right now, that you would walk into that season where you're actually doing what God called you to do. It's the most fulfilling thing ever. And it looks different for everybody, right? It's not the same thing. And so I think that's what the word awaken encompasses, so many purposes and wills of God for each and every one of us. And it all looks different, but at the same time, we're all one body working together. And so the body is functioning correctly because every single inch of the body has its own purpose, its own calling. So let's get into the nitty gritty of why we brought you here today. So, can you really quickly just share with us your testimony about like how you came to the Lord? Like, how was Jesus introduced to you and moving forward?
Yeah, so in my case specifically, I was actually atheist. I didn't even believe in God. I had no belief system in the sense that I didn't grow up in church. I didn't have a pastor or even, I think I would go to Catholic church here and there. But when I was in college, this hunger started awakening inside of me, it started awakening to know, okay, there's got to be truth out there. So what is the truth? So I started taking like philosophy classes and religion classes, and I started learning about all these different doctrines, and I started learning about just all these different things, and I guess that curiosity in me, it's funny, like, you know how like the word says that like if we seek truth, truth finds us, you know? So I started like, as I started searching, I mean, I learned about Judaism, about Buddhism, about Hinduism, about Muslims.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
You were seeking for sure.
Yeah, there was even like a Muslim organization in my church, and I was so curious to understand like why they believed what they did. And I remember I went to join. I visited a mosque. I was just so curious, you know. And then finally, I had a really good friend of mine visit town. She had moved to Miami, then came back to, you know, just to visit family. And when I went to visit her, I had seen a change in her, and I was so intrigued by that change. And she started sharing with me about, you know, about God, what Jesus was doing in her life. Wow. And then she put an audio, so you never know who's gonna, you know, hear what you're doing. I heard an audio about purpose, and about like the Father's love. And as I was listening to that, something in my belly was like I guess, yeah, like my baby was jumping, I guess you could say. And I was just so curious, so I was like, I need to go there. I need to see if that's what I'm looking for. Like something just clicked, you know. Like when revelation hits you and it's from God, it stirs your spirit. Like it does something to you. Yeah. And sure enough, that's what happened. So I visited the church, and I had this beautiful encounter with God. I asked God to forgive me of my sins. I had no idea that I was in sin. I didn't even know what that was. Wow. And sure enough, like I encountered the love of God, and it changed my heart, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I always think like, how does it feel to like not believing anything, like not having something to believe in, not like a hope or something like you were before, like you were looking, you knew there was something else. You felt like, I would say, empty, like there was something that was not fulfilling you, and you're looking and you're looking and you're looking. How does you know, like, how do you live like that? How do you live without a hope or not believing in God? Like,
yeah, I actually used to think that you found that within yourself. So I thought that people that went to church were looking to want to believe in something because they didn't have enough, I guess, faith to believe in themselves. You know, that's what I thought. So at that point, I was so ignorant, you know, I was so blinded to realize, because it's pride that tells us that we don't need God. It's pride that tells us that, oh, I'm good, I got it together, like I'm, you know, and it's like, no, hold on a second, like life now depending on Him is so much more beautiful. Because I realized that whatever I was thinking that I could find within myself, it is so much better to be able to find that within Him, you know, and that He will become strong when I'm weak, you know. That's awesome.
That's awesome. That's a great testimony for sure, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Maybe people who are watching now and you're saying, I'm not sure what to believe. There's so many religions out there. People always tell me that. How do you know that's the one? If there's so many other beliefs, so many other gods, so many other religions out there, and this walk with Christ is more of an experience than anything else. You have to experience the Father's love. And when you talked about the Father's love, I feel like that's what everybody is yearning for in this generation. Like when you talk about fatherlessness, that is one of the biggest cancers in our society, right? In the human race. And maybe just in the Western Hemisphere, because maybe in other cultures they have it together a little bit, but over here it's like the Father may even be there, but He's not there at the same time. And so people are yearning for the Father's love. And I think that coming to the Father and receiving His love is just an experience like you can't compare to anything else. So I think that's beautiful. And talking about the Father, talking about God, we know that He speaks. And we believe that, and we hold true to that. We hold fast to that God speaks today. And so we want to talk a little bit about that. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the voice of God and how does God speak to us?
Yeah, so wow, that's a very, very interesting question. And there's two things that I always like to share about the voice of God. There are ways that He speaks very consistently to all of us, but then He has specific ways that He speaks to each of us. So that's why it's important first to get to know Him, because as we get to know Him, we get to know how He speaks to us, you know, because He designed us also uniquely. So God has a way to communicate with each of us in such in a way where He knows that we would get it, you know, like He just has keys to like our heart, like, oh, that's what you mean by that, or that's what, you know, like maybe some and like in my personal case, there's been different times I've experienced His voice. First of all, I've experienced His audible voice.
Wow.
So I've noticed, you know, it kind of sounds like audible means like a good thing, like, oh,
I've never
you've heard God.
experienced it like that.
Well, I realized that God speaks audibly when you don't really know his voice. Because it's kind of like
Trying to get your attention, kind of.
yes, he kind of has to yell a little bit because you're like, oh, you know it's God, you know. So sometimes I notice when you get to know his voice better, now it becomes more of a whisper. You know, at the beginning I would hear his voice audibly because I didn't know how to hear his voice. So he had to speak loud because I was atheist. So mind you, God is like, I need you to believe that this is me, you know.
Exactly.
He'll also speak to you through dreams, you know, which are really important. He'll speak to you through your perceptions. So sometimes you'll feel like a gut feeling or just an internal feeling. And sometimes he'll speak directly to your thoughts, you know. And God can also speak through an external voice, you know, whether it be a prophecy or whether it be just in conversation with people. Sometimes they'll say something and it'll trigger you inside. You're like, I know that was God speaking to me, even though that person was just making a regular comment. They had no idea. Their intention was not to say God said. It was just, I know God spoke to me. I felt it in my spirit. That's why we have to be in tune with him to know what is it that he is saying. You know, and also this will happen a lot in church or in a message where, let's say if a pastor preaches for an hour and a half, let's say, because there's different people sitting in the audience, not everything in that hour and a half applied to you. You have to discern when you're in the service, what is God speaking to me through that vessel? And many times you'll know in your spirit when you catch something that you're like, that was God speaking to me.
Wow.
You know, he'll either answer a question or he'll give you a direction or a confirmation. And he'll say something key and you're like, okay, I know that was God because my spirit jumped and I felt that.
I like that. I like when you said it started like something loud, but then it became a whisper. I like that because that's how God speaks to me, you know, mostly. Like it's just such a tender whisper, you know, like if I don't catch it, it's gone. I have to be aware. I have to be connected with God. I have to be like, I know this is you, because it could really, you know, sometimes it could be confusing. There's people that maybe, you know, they say, I don't know how to hear God. I don't know. I maybe sometimes I have this thought, but is it my thoughts or is it God's thoughts? Or how do we, you know if it's God or if it's just our own thoughts? Like that's a valid question, right?
Yeah, very valid. In my case, I've asked myself that specific question before. And I've done now two things to try to find the answer.
If it's not A, it's B.
Yeah, you know. The first one is sometimes if that thought comes and you're not sure if it's God, just go for it. Just go for it because you'll know. Yeah, like let's say an example, like, and you'll get to exercise that muscle. You know, let's say an example, God tells me, like, give Jenny these glasses, an example. And I'm questioning, did God really tell me that? Or I'm not sure, you know? Well, let me just do it. And then, you know, you'll know from the reaction, the fruit, you'll see like, I got that. Or, okay, now I know for next time, you know? Or the second thing is wait on it enough, presenting it to God until you get an answer. Like pressing on it. And eventually, that actually happened to me. There was a really big life decision I had to make at a point in my life. And many times people can give you opinions and you want to really hear God. And I remember I decided to take off days from work to just dedicate them to God. So I used my PTO to just think of the Lord in my prayer room, you know. And I wasn't really sure. So what I did was I went into that room and I just started praying in tongues. Praying in tongues. And the first day, I think I stayed there like 4 hours. Nothing happened. I didn't hear anything. I didn't sense anything. I mean, I knew God was there. I could feel God, but I didn't get an answer. And then I'm like, that's okay. I separated, you know, this 3 days in my week plus the weekend to see God. He's going to answer me before I leave this room. He's going to answer me. And then I did it the second time. I went back in there. The second day, I had more time, so I was there for like 7 hours. And I prayed in tongues. I worshipped. I prayed and prayed and prayed. Then I waited on God. And then on the third day, nothing happened that second day. And then on the third day, I went back, you know? And at that time, what happened is the first 2 days, God was cleansing me from opinions, from my own thoughts, from my own emotions, from the outside world, from the enticement of, if I do then this and this, and we get worked up in our own heads.
Reasoning.
Yeah, and then that third day he gave me the answer, and he spoke so clearly. It was so personal. And then I gave him a condition to confirm it. So, okay, I heard you, I sensed it, God, I know this is you. And then I was like, now this is my condition. And sure enough, the condition aligned perfectly to what I had sensed in my prayer time. So sometimes if you're not really sure, especially when you have to make a very key life turning decision, just keep presenting it to God and separate time to really get a clear answer that God spoke to you in that secret place. And it might take hours, it might take days, but you will know that God spoke to you.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because a lot of times in our generation, the microwave generation, like we like to call it, we want things like this. We want things right away, at the snap of a finger. And if we don't get it, we're kind of like, oh, well, let's move on, or we kind of get frustrated. And the key word that you said there was give it time, because a lot of times it will take 3 days of you just being in prayer and closing the door behind you, turning off all electronics and social media, and to hear the voice of God. Sometimes it's immediately, but that's not up to us. We don't decide when. We just have to present it to God. And I think another important thing, and I'm sure you could attest to this, is that God will give you a peace, an overwhelming peace, when he has given you the answer. If you're still wrestling about it, after you have prayed, after you've presented it to God, after you've fasted if you have to fast, you've closed the door behind you, gone to your secret place, and you've really pressed in about it, and you still don't feel peace about it, a lot of times for me, that's a trigger that I know that's, okay, I still need to pray about this. I haven't felt peace about it yet. And I think that that's a big thing in a lot of Christians, where we're not giving time for God to give us peace about things. We're just rushing into things. And it is true that we need to take risks. I believe in that 100%. And that's been one of the biggest testimonies of my life, just jumping by faith, going into it by faith. But for these big life-turning decisions, right? Like Philippians 4:7, I think it says, talking about, the peace of God that will guard our hearts. In other words, our hearts will know what God's will is, what we have to do with that overwhelming peace that God gives us. So after those 3 days, I'm sure you could say, okay, I felt peace after what I felt God was telling me.
Yeah.
And that's so important, because if you were still wrestling within you, you wouldn't have had that assurance that this is exactly what God is saying.
Yeah.
And so it's two things. It's actually presenting it to God, giving God that moment, giving God that time, and then feeling that peace. A lot of times we want to do it the opposite way, or not at all. We just want, okay, God, I'm ready for you to give me some peace about this. Let's go. But we haven't even really prayed about it, right? And so we kind of have to change that mentality, because in our culture, we want everything right away. And so sometimes our culture, like you're saying, God has to cleanse us of even our culture, our way of thinking, our thought process, so that he can actually speak to us. So those 2 days of purging was even God saying, this is going to take some time for you. Like, you want breakthrough in certain areas of your life, you really got to go in, right? So I think that's awesome.
I feel like God does that on purpose too sometimes, because I think I heard this in one of the conferences Bill Johnson was preaching, and he said, I remember this very clearly because it spoke to me. He said, we want the results, but God enjoys the process. So because once God gives you, he answers your prayer, then it's done. Then you nobody goes back to prayer for 7 hours to thank God because he answered the prayer. Nobody does that, right? So he knows he's not gonna get it afterwards. So he makes us, be, draw near to him, and he enjoys that process. And I just like that.
Yeah, God told me this one time. I was leading worship. It was I want to say 8 years ago, maybe 7. God was saying, I take joy in your brokenness because I get a chance to piece you back together.
Wow.
And that was so awesome, because sometimes we want to do it ourselves. We want to put the pieces together ourselves. And God is saying, let yourself be broken. Go to that place where you're just completely laid out before God, where you don't know what to do. You don't know the answer. You don't know what's coming next. Let me put the pieces together.
Yeah.
And it takes that sometimes. So that was awesome.
Yeah. And something else about hearing God is, most of the time after you hear God, you're going to take an action, right, to what you felt he spoke. Yeah. But then other voices will rise up, because the enemy now is going to come back and make you question, am I really supposed to do that? You know, so we also, that's why it's so important to also make that time for him, to know that that gives you such a confidence. You know, if not, it can bring confusion or double-mindedness, or it can bring doubt or fear, you know, because the enemy will come after God spoke to make you question it. Did God really say?
Wow.
You know, did this really happen? But what if this happens? Or what, you know, you are going to go into another battle that comes even after the answer. So that's why it's important to know, I know God spoke, you know, and lastly, I'll say, one time I heard a friend that I really admire them in God a lot, that sometimes they would have dreams and they wouldn't know how to interpret those dreams. So he says that, like, it would take him at least one whole day seeking God to even get revelation of what that dream really meant. So that really shows us that sometimes to go deep in the spirit, we really have to give it time, you know, and so for life, you know, changing decisions, give yourself that time with God, you know, that the Lord will answer, and we will know.
Yeah.
We will know. Yeah.
Man, that's so true. I was telling a friend this the other day, I'm like, we're so spoiled because even after God has spoken to us.
Remember I said that?
But it's true, we're so spoiled because even after God has spoken to us, we say, God, can you confirm this? And God will go ahead and do it. And I'm sure he's thinking to himself, but I already told you, you know what I mean? Like, this was already revealed to you. I spoke to you. You prayed about it. We had this conversation already, but a lot of times we second guess because we do let the voices of other people in the world and the enemy come in and tell us things to kind of want to switch our minds or change what we were thinking. And really, God already spoke to us if you think about it.
Yeah.
And God is so awesome that he'll even reconfirm it to you again. And I'm just like, God, you really don't have to, but thank you for doing it. I'm glad keep doing it, God. Please keep confirming your word to us. That's awesome.
Yeah.
One last quick little question. How important is it for Christians to be able to hear the voice of God in their lives? Like maybe if you want to speak to the people watching now, how important is it for them to hear God's voice in this day and age?
Yeah, it is extremely important because, one, you want to get to know the will of God individually, for yourself, for your family, and even for our nation. You know, it's so important to know what is God saying in the midst of so many voices, in the midst of so many things. So one thing that I suggest is God cares about the big things, but God also cares about the little things. You know, and you can practice hearing God and exercising that voice or that muscle, that faith, that accuracy in your spirit by testing God in just little things. You know, maybe it could even be something as simple as what to wear. I remember one day I was going to the gym and I was having back pain, and I went into my prayer time with God, and literally the Lord tells me, stop praying. Go to Sports Authority. Literally, he tells me, go to Sports Authority. They're going to have this brace that you can buy for your back. So and it's gonna be good. Like go buy it now. What? Like, it's not just the big things; it's the little things. So I was obedient. You know, something about God's voice is you have to be willing to listen.
Yes.
You know, God will, if He knows your heart is not ready to hear something, He might abstain from it. And also prepare yourself to really put yourself in a neutral place of, okay, Lord, you're going to speak to me. I don't want to hear what I want. I want to hear what you really have to say. And that's the hard part, you know, because He might stay silent if He already spoke and we keep asking, you know. But anyway, so I went to the store, and sure enough, apparently the Sports Authority was closing. It was going to close in like a day. It was a big final sale. I go and there was literally only one brace left in pink and black, which was so cute. You know, my size, the perfect price. It was just like, how did this happen? How did God know this? So God, you know, practice first in the little details. Practice through His word. You know, if you know His word is constant, His word is true, and it will never change. You know, He'll speak those verses into you. And then you can begin exercising that in bigger things where your faith can really grow, you know. But definitely God's voice is so important because it really, it gives us confidence, you know, to know who we are in God. And it also leads us, it strengthens us, it affirms us. And without it, you'll be so lost, and you'll just want to fit in and be like everyone else. And that's not who God designed us to be.
Wow.
Amen. That's so good. I always relate it back to a time when, this is a little anecdote, when I was 4 in daycare. And you're talking about recognizing God's voice, and the Bible says, you know, his sheep know his voice, and we are his sheep. Why? Because the shepherd is constantly with the sheep and speaking to them, and so the sheep know who to listen to. And I remember when I was 4 in daycare, I would know when my mom arrived to pick us up because her keys jingled a certain way. She had a certain set of keys, and when she showed up at the doors were closed, but I knew she was there to pick me and my brother up because the keys started jangling or jingling. So I recognized the sound of her key, and I knew she was there. In the same form, we have to recognize God's voice and be able to, like you said, for you it's a whisper, for me it may be something else, for her something else. But it all comes back to the Word of God, right? We are his sheep, and his sheep know his voice.
Yeah.
So it comes back to knowing his voice, not just like a random, like, oh, I think I heard God. You're going to get to the point, especially after your time of intimacy and getting to know God and your relationship with him, where you're going to start recognizing his voice even more, right? There are people that can pick up the phone and say hello, and right when they say hello, they don't have to say their name. You know exactly who they are, right? We all have those people in our lives. Well, that's how it has to be with God, right? So that's so beautiful. That's so awesome. And honestly, thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much for saying yes. Because I know I told you, I mentioned it, and the next day I was like, so we're scheduling this podcast soon. Thank you for saying yes, because I knew since the moment I heard your testimony that you carry something, you know, you have a testimony, you know, you carry the presence of God, and that you have so much more. She has so much more to share. And maybe we can invite her back soon, because I know you have a lot more testimonies that I'm sure you could have shared about the voice of God. And thank you so much for coming. It's a blessing. I was truly blessed by everything that you said, and I agree too. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for tuning in with us. Thank you for watching. If you're watching or if you are just listening, thank you so much for tuning in with us. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. You can find this podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook. So thank you for watching us. Thank you for tuning in one more time, and have a blessed day.
I love you guys.
Bye.